The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, I just wanted to thank everybody for being here today. We're about to get started. Just wanted to remind everybody that this is the GMA 14 Regional Water Planning Group meeting for today. We will have the panelists talk during the meeting, but right now the attendees are muted. If you are planning to have public comment, you've registered beforehand, we will go through you one at a time and unmute you and give you an opportunity to speak. Otherwise, you'll remain muted throughout the call. There's a handout available that you should see. That's actually the agenda of the meeting. And then we'll just take it as we go on the way. So with that, John, feel free to start whenever you like.
Sounds good. I appreciate everybody being here. Just to reiterate everything Mike just said, thanks for joining us. This is July 15th, 2020, gathering of the GMA 14 members to discuss our VFCs. We haven't done an introduction in a long time, and I think this setup might be a good way to do it. Why don't I start? John Martin, Southeast Texas Groundwater. I'll pass it along to Zach there, and he can introduce himself and pass it along.
Zach Holland with Bluebonnet GCD, and I'll pass to Miss Samantha.
Hi, I'm Samantha Ryder with Lone Star Groundwater GCD. Beverly.
Hi, I'm Beverly Hopkins with Brazoria County Groundwater. Can't see who's.
Mike Turco with the Harris-Galveston Subsidence District.
Robert Thompson with the Fort Bend Subsidence District.
You out there, Gary? How about you?
Gary's here taking care of Polk County and San Jacinto County.
Thank you, sir. Looks like we also have Mr. Wilcox there. You got your mic muted, Pudge? I see him talking. Well, we will just introduce Mr. Wilcox. He's Chambers County representative, correct? And Mr. Larry French.
Yes, Larry French with the Texas Water Development Board.
Good morning, Larry. How are you today?
Oh, doing great. Thank you.
With the intros in order, why don't we go to receipt of notices? I'm getting a little out of order there, aren't I? Sorry about that, folks, but receipt of posted notices. We have confirmation that all the groundwater districts have properly posted this meeting at all the courthouses and where necessary. At this point, let's move along to item number 4, which is public comments. And I know of 3 at this point. The first one, we will ask Mr. John Yours, front and center, to give his comments. I did provide his written comments, but he emailed me just a short while ago that said he amended them a little bit and added a paragraph, and I will upload the revised version of that before the day's out.
I do not see Mr. Yours on the attendance list right now.
He was there earlier. Let me see if I can get a copy of his comments then and read them for him. Y'all bear with me for one moment, see if I can find his latest comments here in my email box. John Martin, Mr. Yours. Let me print these off real quick. I'm back. Okay, any chance Mr. Yoris has come since I started looking for his comments?
I don't see his name on the attendee list at the moment.
Okay, well then I will read his comments for him. It says, thank you, my name is John Yoris, a resident of Grogan's Mill Village in the Woodlands, Texas. Today I want to continue to express my concerns about the LSGCD lack of action that will protect the residents of southern Montgomery County, which includes GMV from subsidence. The Woodlands acted responsibly and switched 6 to 8 million gallons per day from groundwater to surface water to meet the demands of their citizens. That action, verified by PM-13 readings, arrested subsidence, but also allowed the Evangeline and Jasper aquifers to both recharge with a water level increase of 50 to 75 feet. Real-time data on aquifer response habits to change in groundwater pumping rates. This change occurred by reducing groundwater pumping by 6 to 8 million gallons per day. We now have LSGCD coming before this group via their Run D and asking for permission to increase groundwater withdrawal rates in Montgomery County by more than 3 times that much to 111,445 acre-feet per year. This proposes to drop the Jasper aquifer water level by over 400 feet and not cause excessive subsidence. Their consultants' unvalidated Jasper compaction estimates need to be peer-reviewed for accuracy. We are expected to think that this will not reverse the aquifer water table gains, bringing back subsidence and cause the woodlands to go all surface water to stem reoccurring subsidence. LSGCD's own charts show that this aggressive pumping will render all the well water pumps in the woodlands inoperable. Surface water is readily available to satisfy the growing Montgomery County water needs. It is time for LSGCD management plan to incorporate surface water in their written plans to meet the water needs and quit pushing a plan that has potential to do irreparable harm to the aquifer's ability to recharge and certainly reintroduce subsidence to southern Montgomery County. I want to thank the Lone Star Board of Directors for approving that Samantha proceed with the agreements with the Woodlands Water and Harris Galveston Subsidence to install a CORS site at SJR ALS number 27 in the Woodlands. Thanks to all the thanks also to SJR for providing the site and utilities, and Grogan's Mill Village Association for providing $1,000 to support this installation. That is Mr. Yours' comments. Again, those are slightly different than the ones that are in the Dropbox file, so I will include those. Next up, we have Mr. Ron Kelling.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. You're ready to roll.
Great. Good morning, members of GMA 14 and guests. My name is Ron Kelling. I'm the Deputy General Manager of the San Jacinto River Authority, which owns and operates and maintains 38 groundwater wells in Montgomery County. As such, we are the largest producer of groundwater in Montgomery County and a stakeholder in this process. I earlier provided, it was late last night, I provided the written comments that we provided to Lone Star Groundwater Conservation District during their public workshop regarding their phase 1 subsidence study that was conducted on Thursday, July the 9th. And in summary, we raised 2 issues about the report. The first one was that originally Lone Star provided only 15 calendar days for their stakeholders to review the report representing over, excuse me, well over a year's worth of effort and resulting conclusions by Lone Star. However, after consideration of numerous comments regarding the short timetable last night, the Lone Star Board did extend the comment period to July 31st of this year. The second item that we raised was, on one hand, Lone Star's consultants devoted a considerable amount of time in their report to dismiss or raise concerns regarding the correlation of water level declines in the Jasper to subsidence and the fault movement presented by others. However, on the other hand, through their own modeling effort, they attempt to justify significant water level declines of almost 700 feet in the Jasper Aquifer resulting from groundwater pumping by correlating it to a limited subsidence of only 0.05 to 0.35 feet. Their messages in the report appear to be contradictory at best. We hope that Lone Star considers and implements the recommendations made by various stakeholders participating in the single public workshop to provide a more transparent, inclusive process during phase 2 of their subsidence study, such that input from stakeholders in Montgomery County and surrounding areas will genuinely be sought, considered, and incorporated in a meaningful way throughout the study. And as a stakeholder, our perception is that the process that was been conducted to date did not appear to be transparent nor inclusive. In contrast, we appreciate the genuine effort of the GMA 14 Joint Planning Committee as you seek to seek, accept, and consider input from various stakeholders within the entire region through this DFC development process. It is refreshing to experience the professionalism that this group exhibits. We are confident that the process this group utilizes will require all proposed DFCs to be accompanied by a run of the Texas Water Development Board GAM that is fully reflective of the attributes, conditions, strengths, advantages, and consequences of the DFCs that it represents, and clearly demonstrates that the DFC is feasible. We're also confident that the process that this group will assure that all DFCs will be evaluated for impacts on land subsidence, in addition to the evaluation of water level drawdowns and impacts on existing wells. And we urge this group to consider all subsidence data for the Jasper layer, given the compressibility variable for that layer in the GAM is intentionally turned down. I thank you for this opportunity to speak before the members of GMA 14.
Thank you, sir. And your packet has been for your comments, and your comments to the Lone Star with the additional pages have been provided to the board in the Dropbox file. I have not had time to read them through yet this morning myself, but if I have any questions, we'll go from there, and I'll give you a call to see if there's anything that you can do to help square me away, as anybody else should do. Next, and I did not get a formal filled out request form from Mr. Marty Jones, but he did ask to speak at this meeting. I did provide a court decision in our Dropbox file. Mr. Jones, are you out there? Would you like to take some time to give some comments?
Mr. Martin, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. How are you this morning, Marty?
Very good, and thank you for the opportunity to have a few moments. I know that Mr. Martin has provided a copy of the Fifth Circuit opinion in Fazzino versus Brazos Valley Groundwater Conservation District to each of the member districts of GMA 14, and I know that Texas Alliance of Groundwater Districts has done a synopsis of that opinion, and I thought I'd take just a couple of minutes to fill in a few things about the opinion that TAG might have missed. There are a couple of important holdings there that I think groundwater districts need to be aware of. One is that landowners may sue groundwater districts in federal court under Section 1983 of the Civil Rights Act for violation of civil rights under color of state law. In holding that, the Fifth Circuit said that groundwater districts are not arms of the state and are not entitled to 11th Amendment immunity from such claims in federal courts. The court also noted that if a groundwater district is not immune from those claims, then its directors individually are not entitled to assert 11th Amendment immunity either. The court also held that landowners do not have to assert takings claims in state court before filing those claims in federal court, which had been the law in the United States for several years before last summer. Third, the Court of Appeals in New Orleans held that federal courts do not have to abstain from taking jurisdiction over landowner lawsuits under Section 1983 because the law is not unsettled in this area. And the court pointed to Day, the EAA versus Day opinion, and it said that that opinion established that landowners owned groundwater in place as constitutionally protected property subject to takings claims. The Fifth Circuit also pointed out that both Day and the Coyote Lake opinions from the Texas Supreme Court established that landowners in a common reservoir are entitled to a fair share of the groundwater beneath their property. In fact, the court, in analyzing Texas law, said it was so clearly established that at one point in the opinion, the court asked, I think in a sarcastic way, what is unsettled about Day's interpretation of the common law and statutory rights of groundwater owners? And then the court noted that because the law concerning ownership and fair share is well settled in Texas, the directors don't enjoy qualified immunity because if there's a violation of constitutionally protected rights, because those rights are clearly understood by reasonable persons to be protected. And so the opinion is an important one. It's one that I think groundwater conservation districts and their directors need to carefully read. I would particularly address your attention to pages 24 through 26 of that opinion in the discussion of ownership and fair share rights that landowners hold. And so I wanted to put this opinion in your hands to ensure that you know that the law concerning ownership and fair share is clearly established in Texas. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Appreciate it. Those are the only three that I've been given advance notice of. Are there any other members of the public in attendance that would like to make a public comment? If so, I guess they can raise their hand, Mike.
Yeah, they can go ahead and raise their hand. And I would just say, Mr. Yours, Mr. Martin read your comments earlier. I don't see any hands up.
Okie doke. That being said, we shall move along. Item number 5, discussion of possible action to approve the minutes of the May 29, 2020 GMA 14 joint planning meeting. You guys have had those for a few days. I'll entertain a motion on those.
I'll move.
Do we have a second? Gary, Zach, anybody? You read them. You wrote them, Zach. Come on. Somebody give us a second.
Gary will second. Sorry, I couldn't find my microphone.
We have a first and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Maybe we should do are there any opposed version? And if there are, take a vote. Beverly, you paying attention there, Beverly?
Yeah, I think I was muted.
Did you vote
I'm in
to
favor.
approve those?
I'm in favor.
Okay. Mr. Ashmore?
Yeah, that's why I seconded. I agree.
Sorry, that was my drop ball there. Mr. Holland?
I wrote them. They're out of my hands, which I'm thankful for. So yes, I agree.
Miss approval of the minutes then. Thanks, guys. Next item, item number 6, update from the Texas Water Development Board and discussion of any related items of interest to GMA 14. Mr. French, any interesting news to speak of?
You bet, Mr. Chairman. There's plenty of interesting news from the agency. Just a couple of things really since our last meeting. First of all, I want to draw your attention to a new way we're communicating. That's a website called the Texas Water Newsroom, and the address is texaswaternewsroom.org. And we think that will be very helpful. It has articles and videos of interest across the whole spectrum of water and planning and resources, technical issues, a lot of flood information there, which would be of interest to the districts here. Let me also call your attention to one of the videos on that site was starring Natalie Ballou, who I think you're all familiar with, and she gives a nice presentation of the groundwater joint planning process and desired future conditions and things that you all would know very well, but what might be very useful information for your constituents and members of your board or whoever would be interested. So encourage you to take a look at that resource at texaswaternewsroom.org. The only other thing I have for you is we have updated our DFC checklist, and that is posted on our groundwater page of the agency website. The main change there is now includes a section on non-relevant aquifers. If you as district representatives identify any aquifers or portions of aquifers that you would declare as non-relevant, there's a checklist to ensure that you would be providing us the information that we'll need to evaluate that. We've also updated other documents on the DFC webpage, but mostly just fairly minor things, but certainly feel free to take a look at those. And if you have any questions, be happy to answer any questions you might have on our updates to that. So those are the two main updates that I have, and that concludes my presentation. Thanks very much.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else have any information out there? Oh, I got one. I'm not sure if y'all recall, it was about not quite a year ago, but at one of our meetings, I kind of victimized 3 of you, Mr. Thompson, Mr. Holland, and Mr. Ashmore, to kind of be a committee to discuss maybe a way that we can pull all of our water level and DFC data together for an easy one-stop shopping kind of way to look at the DFC data. And I did kind of put a fire under them a few weeks ago, asked them to start working toward that for us. Zach, were you able to get together at all yet?
For a quick clarification, what item are we on?
6.
From an update from the, okay, so that's where, okay. I was thinking you were jumping to 7 again, so.
Wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, just trying to keep up. Reached out and kind of touched base kind of in a follow-up to your email, and again, kind of our general approach was to make the announcement at this meeting and then gather the information from all the respective districts and participants moving forward into the for preparation and kind of presentation at the next GMA meeting. So again, if y'all can get y'all's records, y'all's reviews, and anything like that relevant on how you're monitoring your DFC, just get those to, I guess, probably a centralized location of me, since I've been tasked with this. Thanks again, Chairman. And then Robert, Gary, and I will kind of consolidate and put all of that information together to walk through at our next meeting.
Thank you, sir. Related items of interest to GMA 14. Anybody else have any? And I see where you were going with that, Zach. It could have gone in 7 just as well. Not bad. Any other comments before we move along? We will now convene as a meeting of the GMA 14 Joint Planning Interlocal Agreement participants. Get to item number 7, which may have just essentially gone through. Presentation and discussion by districts or interlocal agreement participants of recent activities of this interest to or impacting GMA 14 planning group. Anybody want to add anything to that?
One thing that I'll add, this is Zach again. We have recently established a partnership with Texas Water Resources Institute on kind of growing and expanding and really establishing the better component and framework of the education outreach portion of the district. And we started that officially on July 1st and look forward to working with them and certainly encourage any of y'all that may have questions, comments, or anything else on that education outreach and just the overall extension of TWRI and AgriLife extension. Contact me and I can get y'all in contact with our contacts over there. And I think it's a really great resource available to us that really fills a pretty big gap with everything else on our plate.
Actually sounds real interesting. I probably will give you a call in the next couple of days to learn more about that. Being a one-person district, I can use all the help I can get when it comes to that kind of stuff. So, thank you, Zach. Anybody else? Items of interest to the GMA 14 planning group?
Yeah, John, this is Samantha. I did want to let everyone know that our phase one draft report of the district subsidence study was released to the public on June 25th. And as you heard a little bit earlier through public comments, last night our board took action to extend those the deadline for public comments to July 31st. All of the draft reports as well as the executive summary are included on the district's website. And then if you don't mind, I'd like to open the floor to one of our technical consultants, Mike Keister. He had a little statement that he wanted to read.
That would be fine, absolutely. Mr.
Great,
Keister, how are you today?
All right, thank you, everybody. Good morning. And, what I wanted to address was that during the previous meeting on May 29th, I presented a map that was from a technical memorandum dated May 21st to Samantha and Ms. Ryder. And the subject of that memorandum was contour maps of predicted drawdown, subsidence, and compaction associated with proposed DFC options. The map in question was captioned subsidence due to pumping and subsidence districts. Now, as stated in the memo, the contours that were shown on the map were developed by turning off the simulated pumping and subsidence districts at the end of the calibration period and comparing those simulated results to the results from the simulations representing the Lone Star proposed DFC options. Now, that map, it presented accurately, it accurately reflects those model results. In comments made during the meeting, it was understood that those results showed what the model predicts within Montgomery County. If the current pumping levels in Montgomery County are maintained, the simulation and the results, they certainly were not meant to incite competition or be derogatory, but were intended really to further illustrate the connection between all of the impacts of groundwater production. So that is, what happens in one area affects neighboring areas. So nonetheless, there were questions raised regarding what the model results illustrate. On June 30th, Wade Oliver, he contacted me to discuss the map and requested a copy of the pumping files. I did provide those files to him on the following day, and we set up a meeting for the 6th, for July 6th, about a week ago. During that follow-up meeting, Wade and I, Wade expressed that due to the pre-consolidation head calculation in the subsidence package, he believed that the results would be very different if the simulation were conducted with no pumping occurring within Montgomery County. To investigate the consideration, I created that pumping file, and as I understood his thoughts to be, performed the simulation, and provided the file with some of my own thoughts to Mr. Oliver the following day. I conveyed the way that I understood and very much appreciated the points that he brought up about investigating the issue in different ways. And I also shared with him that, to his point, performing the modeling with no pumping in Montgomery County, it does have a different result, but the magnitude of the difference depends on the area. In some areas, that difference in simulations is greater than in others. As I continue to review and discuss those results from the various simulations with my peers, the point of the original simulation, it remains unchanged, though. Namely, the point was that pumping in one county affects the neighboring county. In addition, the magnitude of the effect from neighbors varies from one area to another. Really, in essence, this exercise and information exchange is the whole point for joint groundwater planning as defined in Chapter 36. In my opinion, it's healthy and it's informative for these different perspectives to be investigated in a scientific and open forum. This investigation of perspectives, it's valuable to all of the members of GMA 14 who are required to vote on DFCs, but who may not have the opportunity to explore those issues outside of the joint planning process. Lone Star, myself, we're appreciative of the various assumptions and approaches that can be used to evaluate those issues, and we certainly welcome the questions and the comments. So while those results that were presented on the map, they are an accurate representation of the model results, we do understand how the caption was too succinct to fully explain the results shown. So as such, I do intend to revise the memorandum with caption and to state more clearly what the contours represent. Namely, that the contours shown on the map represent the difference in predicted additional subsidence in 2080 from 2009, based on LSGCD DFC option 3, also known as Run D, and a simulation with the LSGCD DFC option 3 pumping file, with no pumping occurring in the subsidence districts between January 1 of 2010 and December 31st of 2080. So in addition, I also will include with that map, just so we see everything, the additional contour maps, some additional contour maps showing the predicted subsidence from the 3 runs, including the one with no pumping in Lone Star, and the 3 simulations, along with the difference from the Run D scenario. Now, all 3 of the simulations, they certainly could be considered unrealistic, but nonetheless, each is useful for planning purposes. I believe that we all understand that pumping within Montgomery County certainly affects aquifer conditions and predicted subsidence within Montgomery County. The map that we showed was simply an aid in understanding how predicted pumping in one area may affect predicted aquifer conditions in another. Communicating this point was really the focus of that original exercise, the memo, and remains the purpose of that simulation in question. So, thank you for allowing me the time, and I'll go ahead and pass back to Samantha there.
Thanks, Mike. That's all I got, John.
Cool. Anybody else? Any comments? Anything of interest to the group? Hearing none.
Just a quick question. Will that statement be provided in the Dropbox? Just want to make note of it. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Item number 8, presentation, discussion, and consideration of the impact on subsidence as required by Texas Water Code 36108 D5. Wade, you're up.
All right, a few administrative items here. Can you guys hear me?
Loud and clear, sir. Very nice.
All right, so I'm on my cell phone this time because of all the issues last time going through the computer audio. So hopefully this is better. And can you guys all see the presentation that I have in front?
Yes, sir.
Perfect. All right, well, as always, I appreciate the opportunity to meet with all of you. The topic today is considering subsidence. So we're making progress as we move along, but it's been a while since we've reviewed what it is that we're doing and why we're doing it. And so I want to make sure to frame what we're talking about today within the overall context. So I know you all know this, but a desired future condition is a quantitative description. Let's see, we lost it here. A quantitative description adopted in accordance with Chapter 36 there of the Water Code of the desired condition of the groundwater resources in a management area, like GMA 14, at one or more specified future times. So that is what we are working towards, adoption of one or more desired future conditions. As you all know, that to propose and adopt desired future conditions, you need to consider many factors. These are the 9 factors listed within Chapter 36 of the Water Code, and we have been working through consideration of these factors in these meetings and in our presentations to GMA 14. Also, to reiterate, the desired future conditions that are adopted by GMA 14 have to pass what's known as the balancing test, which is described in Chapter 36 as a balance between the highest practicable level of groundwater production and the conservation, preservation, protection, recharging, and prevention of waste of groundwater and relevant today, control of subsidence in the management area. So we are working through evaluation of all of this information related to the aquifer and production from the aquifer as we move towards setting desired future conditions. This is the current schedule. It is unchanged from our last meeting in late May. So we are here in July can you all see my mouse when I'm moving it or no?
I'm not seeing it, no. Oh, there it is,
No.
yes.
Okay, well,
yes.
Okay. So we're here in July, having a meeting on evaluation of subsidence, which was what was reviewed over the last couple of months. And as we go through, you have all seen this before, but there's a logic to the schedule that we have, and we have moved from the second bubble here to the third bubble between last meeting and this meeting. So we evaluated baseline groundwater management information in the beginning, and then we went through a phase of balancing test model runs and additional model runs following off of that, and then finally in the last meeting, selection of a few potential model runs to use when evaluating the additional factors. I want to reiterate at this stage that selection of model runs for evaluation of the additional factors does not obligate you, tie you in any way to select a DFC or a set of DFCs that are consistent with these model runs. It was a decision by the members of the GMA to use those. I hope it's clear to everybody that no commitments have been made about what the DFCs are going to be. Okay. As we move through the additional factors, the hope and plan is that the opinions of the group will coalesce around an approach to desired future conditions so that in early 2021, we can propose one or more DFCs for adoption, which proposing a DFC for adoption kicks off a public comment period and all of that. So that's the path that we're going down. Are there any questions on this so far? Okay. Moving on. So the purpose of the presentation today is really to evaluate the subsidence factor in the context of the model runs that were selected last time. So I'll be reviewing some general subsidence concepts, causes of subsidence, and reviewing subsidence data and monitoring, and then look at the modeled subsidence for the three scenarios that we reviewed. So quickly, you will hear a couple of terms when we're talking about subsidence. Subsidence is the lowering or the sinking of land surface, typically in response to removal of some sort of subsurface support. For what we're talking about here, the subsurface support is provided by the groundwater and the pressure within the groundwater beneath the ground. So subsidence occurs at the surface. That's the key feature there. Compaction is definitely related to subsidence, but it is a decrease in the volume that is a thinning of the geologic formation. So that occurs beneath the surface. So you can have compaction of the Chico, compaction of the Evangeline, but subsidence isn't aquifer specific. It is what occurs at the land surface. So I hope that distinction makes sense, just so that it's clear as we're moving forward. So the understanding the concept of subsidence, you really have to drill down into a pretty fine scale here. So the Gulf Coast Aquifer and the individual units of the Gulf Coast Aquifer are composed primarily of sands and clays. Sands are where groundwater wells are typically completed to, or at least that's where the aquifer that is, or excuse me, the water that is coming out of those wells is sourced from. And so sand grains are, if you can think of the beach, they're typically large, visible to the naked eye, relatively roundish. I've got a zoomed in picture of some sand grains here on the left side. And so this is the granular structure of sandier portions of the aquifer, and the spaces between the sand grains is what allows water to flow through. And because of their shape and size, they do not compact in nearly the same way that clays do. So we have a very microscopic view of clay minerals on the right side here. And I hope you can see that the platy, this flat platy structure of the clay minerals here. So if you think of sand grains like balls, clay minerals are, and clay grains are much smaller, and they're platy like playing cards. Okay, so the difference in shape between these two is why you will often hear that subsidence and, compaction occurs within the clay portions of the aquifer. So where the clay is, how thick these clay lenses are, this is the source of the compaction that leads to subsidence. To diagram this out a little bit more, we've got sand grains over here. So if a sand portion of the aquifer compacts, there's a limit to how much thinning, how much compaction can occur here. If a clay compacts, given the different shape of the grains, there's much more of a thinning and much more of a compaction that can occur. So when you're producing water, as I mentioned before, you produce water from the sand sections within the aquifer. It reduces the pressure within the sandier unit. That reduction in pressure propagates into the neighboring clay units, and then that removal of the pressure is also a removal of the support. We'll call it's called the effective stress that is holding up land surface, and so the clay grains rearrange in a flatter orientation. That is the action of compacting to adjust to that new lower pressure. So does that make sense so far? The compaction occurs within the clays, the production occurs within the sands, and the pressure is propagating from one layer to the other. So the Gulf Coast aquifer, we typically think of it in terms of the Chico, the Evangeline, the Burkeville, and the Jasper. You could divide it up into smaller geologic units if you'd like. And this study, Young and Others 2016, that I'm referencing here does that. But I want to show you a cross-section. It's cross-section 2 here running on through your district. You have all seen this before. Let me orient you to this real quick. So each of these vertical lines is a geophysical log. This is the reference elevation, so the elevation above, or for the most part below sea level. We have the county shown here, and this is the API number for this particular well. The colors that are shown represent a couple of things. If it's blacked out, that means it's a clay. So that's really relevant to what we're talking about today, because any subsidence that occurs is going to be due to compaction within these blacked out areas. The colored sections indicate an estimate of the water quality within what is within the sandy sections. So to zoom in on that inset from the previous slide, what I want to point out is that the aquifer, the Gulf Coast aquifer, is not just one thick section of sand, and the Burkeville is not just one thick section of clay without sand in it. The whole system is composed of interbedded sands and clays layered on top of each other, so that when you produce out of one or more of these sand units, it is inevitable that some of that reduction in pressure will propagate into the neighboring clay units. And the speed with which that happens, the degree to which that happens, depends on how much clay there is, depends on the thickness of the individual clay units and their proximity to the sand. And so there's a lot of moving parts here. Subsidence has historically been a really significant issue within the Houston area. Mr. Turco could give hours of presentations on this. I'm sure. I'm not going to do that justice here, but I want to hit on one point here about monitoring subsidence. So the most common and most widespread way that subsidence is monitored in the Houston area is through what's known as these GPS sites. And so this is an example of one here on the left, but it's capturing the change in the height vertically of a known reference point using either a continuously monitored reference station or a portable reference station like what's shown here. Okay, so this map on the right here shows the current distribution of GPS monitoring sites within GMA 14. And it's been my observation that the number of sites has been increasing over time. I'm sure Mike could add color to that about what the plans are for the future if you'd like, but this is the current distribution. So we looked at the subsidence over time at several of the GPS monitoring sites. Here, in comparison to the water levels at those sites. And so here's the location map. This is PAM Site 4 in Fort Bend County. And so you can see the vertical displacement the units here are in feet. So there's been nearly a foot of subsidence at this particular site over since 1995, so the last 25 years. There's been a shallowing of the slope here recently that has been coupled with an increase in the water level in the Evangeline at a well relatively close by. This is PAM Site 1. Don't have a nearby well to reference on this, but there's been, since 94, a little over almost 2.5 feet of subsidence at this site. This is PAM Site 13 in southern Montgomery County. We have looked at this one before, and you can see that there's considerable subsidence approaching a foot since 2001, and then the slope of this line appears to shallow considerably in association with increasing water levels in the aquifer in that area. This is in Chambers County, and so we've got some PAM sites now. We're getting away from a little bit away from the main Houston metro area. You can see that there is not considerable subsidence at this site in Chambers County. There's also not a lot of groundwater pumping. Yes, sir.
I just add something real quick.
Yeah.
Not to get too far in the weeds, but there are different. Let's talk about these as GPS sites, and then there's inside of the umbrella of these GPS land surface deformation monitoring sites. There are PAM sites, which are constructed a certain way. There are CORS sites, which are continuous, that are constructed a certain way. And then there are other CORS sites that are operated and maintained by other agencies that are mounted and operated in a certain way. So I just want to make it clear that, like, this TXWI isn't a PAM site. It's a continuously operating GPS reference station that's used by NGS, but it's not necessarily a PAM site like you pictured earlier. And I just want to make sure that we're clear on that. A PAM site actually has a benchmark about 30 meters below, or about 30 feet below land surface, and to try to get away from the superficial shrink and swell that we see throughout most of the area. And it's that benchmark that we're monitoring. It's not only its vertical movement, but its horizontal movement as well. So I just want to make sure that we're clear on that there's some of these are subtle differences. And for the purpose of understanding vertical movement, it isn't that big of a deal, but I just wanted us to be clear that some of them are a little bit different than others.
Thank you for that clarification, Mike. And I believe in the GPS site nomenclature here, all of the PAM sites, as you've mentioned, have the PA in the beginning.
They're either listed PA or P0. PA or P0. Yeah. Start with the P.
Right. Thank you, Mike. But all that said, regardless of the changes in the way that these, or the differences in the way that these sites are constructed, and this continuously monitored site, as you mentioned, we're not seeing a lot of long-term trend in, we're not seeing a long-term downward trend in the vertical position of this site. This is, let's see, this is the SISD site out in Austin County, and we see a little bit of a downward trend. If you squint and look at the long-term moving average, this is over a shorter time period as well, about 5 years. So this is out on the western edge of GMA 14. This is a continuously monitored site. TXNV, this is in Grimes County, and you see a little bit of a decline in the last few years. We don't have a lot of water level information right nearby to corroborate this, but trying to get a good spatial distribution here. And again, this is TXHE, so this is in Waller County, and so you do see, again, continuously monitored, and you do see a relatively slow but consistent downward trend that corresponds with water level declines in this area. So there's this relationship between water level declines and land surface subsidence, and this is unsurprising and not at all new to this group, but linking back to what we discussed before, the reason for that relationship is that a water level decline is a depressurization of the water underneath the ground, and that water was serving a purpose of helping support the land surface above it, and so the grains rearrange to the new pressure condition when pumping leads to water level declines. This is an LCBR site in Washington County too, so pretty flat, corresponding with relatively flat water levels. We didn't have a well too near this area though. So before I go back to this, there are lots of resources that you can go to for subsidence information. I'm going to highlight one here on the next slide. So this is the Harris-Galveston Subsidence District website. I did not give Mr. Turco a heads up that I was referencing this, but Mike, I'm confident you're okay if I'm directing people to your site if they'd like additional information. So this, if you go to their site and go to the research tab, you can go to aquifer data. And so it takes you to this page, and you can go to an interactive map of subsidence rates. So this is an ArcGIS map, and it pulls up all of these reference stations. And so you can see that they have two different categories. There's the district managed stations, and then those managed by the University of Houston. Okay, and then you can go into any individual site, click on it, and get the latitude and longitude. You get the site name. You can get the number of years that have been observed, the total subsidence. Keep in mind this is in centimeters. You can actually get the data table, and this is showing both vertical and horizontal movement, as Mike mentioned. And you can get a plot of that change over time as well. So if you haven't gone and checked that out, I encourage you to do so. Just wanted to highlight that for all of you. Historically, there has been considerable subsidence that has occurred in the Houston area. You all know this. Most of that, this map that you're seeing here is modeled historical subsidence from pre-development, so before we went and started pumping groundwater to 2009. The subsidence is up to 8 to 10 feet in some areas near the ship channel. And in response to this, those subsidence districts have put in place reductions and reliance in groundwater and has arrested much of the subsidence in this area. What we're focusing on in our subsidence evaluation for GMA 14 is looking at additional subsidence moving forward. So the plots that you'll see of subsidence, or the maps that you'll see of subsidence on the following slides are additional subsidence from 2009 and beyond. Okay. So as we're talking about the model, briefly want to make a few points on this. So we use, and as we have with all the modeling before, the Houston area groundwater model, which uses the ModFlow subpackage to estimate compaction within each of the individual model layers, and then the sum of that is the overall subsidence. The way that it works, and this is in line with a comment that Mr. Keister made earlier about the historical minimum and the pre-consolidation head, is that when the water level in an aquifer layer drops below the historical minimum water level, an inelastic compaction, that is, it's permanent compaction, can occur. Okay, so if the water level in the aquifer is above that within the current model, even if there is some drawdown, if that water level stays above the lowest point that it had been historically, it's not going to lead to additional subsidence. That's why there's not a one-to-one, always a one-to-one relationship between subsidence and water levels, because we have to also consider the water level history for that particular site. Another important point on the modeling of subsidence here is that head changes in the clays do not lag those in the sand. So I mentioned earlier that pumping in the sands, that pressure has to propagate into the clay layers. Depending on the thickness of the clay layers, that can happen quickly, or that can happen over a longer period of time. The current model assumes that that happens instantaneously. It's my understanding that the new model being developed by USGS will allow for delays in that aspect of the model. And then finally, the last bullet here, compaction and subsidence can occur within the Jasper unit of the Gulf Coast Aquifer in this model, but it's important to note that, and this was stated earlier, the parameters were set so that the compaction parameters within the model were set so that subsidence within the Jasper is very small. The current conceptual model for the Jasper Aquifer is that compaction can occur, and more compaction is likely to occur than what is presented within this model. So at the last meeting, the GMA moved to move forward with 3 scenarios and evaluating the additional factors for these 3 scenarios. So those were 70%, no less than 70% median available drawdown remaining, and no more than 1 foot of average additional subsidence between 2009 and 2080. That was the first one. The second one was no less than 80% median available drawdown remaining, and no more than 1 foot of average additional subsidence between 2009 and 2080. And then the third one, I have an extra 0 here, just notice, forgive me for that. The third one was the 70% and 1 foot with using a different base well file. So instead of using a base well file from the 2016 round of DFCs, this base well file will be the Run D, which was developed by Lone Star Groundwater District. Okay, so those are the three simulations that we're going to look at modeled additional subsidence. So this is the 70% and 1 foot. Keep in mind this is additional between 2009 and 2080, and you see each of the different colors represents a 1 foot interval. And so you can see that a lot of the subsidence is focused. We've got some in Fort Bend County, some in southern Montgomery County, a little off on the eastern side of GMA 14, but you see largely the larger values are on the southeastern end of the Gulf Coast Aquifer, and this is partly due to the compressibility in a real way of the sediments of the Gulf Coast Aquifer, and it's in part due to that limitation of the model that I described earlier, in which the Jasper unit, while it technically can compact, is not set up within the model to have significant compaction within a model run. This is the 80% available drawdown remaining and 1 foot of additional subsidence. And again, you'll see that there is less subsidence in this scenario than in the one before it. And to clarify a point here, both of these have the same subsidence threshold of 1 foot, but to reiterate it from last time, because we have raised the available drawdown threshold, there is less pumping occurring in the model overall. And so there is less water level decline and subsequently less subsidence that occurs. And then finally, this is 70% available drawdown remaining and 1 foot of average additional subsidence. And this last plot and the first one that I presented are very close to one another in magnitude. The main difference is within Montgomery County, because that's where the Rundy well files were changed, and there is additional pumping within Montgomery County in this last scenario compared to the first one. So there's a bit more subsidence in that area in this last scenario than there is in the first one. So that's the distribution of subsidence within the model runs that you guys have selected to move forward with the evaluation of these additional factors. The quantitative average subsidence within the counties has been presented in previous meetings, and so I'm not going to reiterate that. So I am happy to answer any questions on what I've presented so far, or we can discuss next steps.
Anybody have any questions for Wade? I know we've got some experts on subsidence out there, so if you have some good comments or information, please let us hear it. Hearing none, back to you, Wade. What do you need us to do from here?
All right. Well, I appreciate you all listening on this. The current plan, this can be updated if you all would like, but the current plan is to evaluate environmental impacts and socioeconomic impacts at the next meeting. So it's going to be a twofer at the next meeting. I'm leaving the private property rights one to a meeting on its own. And then one thing that I did not touch on in this presentation, there's a recent study out of SMU looking not, it's related to subsidence, but it's looking at aseismic fault movement through their remote sensing and using INSAR. And one thing that I was looking to see if you all want to consider is whether that being fault movement is something that you want to look at under the other relevant information factor, which is factor 9. There's many things that you could add on to that, but I want to put that in your ear. It's something that doesn't hit the factors 1 through 8 really cleanly, but maybe something that the group wants to look at.
And that was essentially item 9, by the way, folks. Discussion of possible action regarding the DFC and path forward for GMA 14 to accomplish statutory mandates for round 3 joint planning.
John?
Yes.
Mr. Marty Jones, his comments, are they in writing as well? It can be added to the Dropbox?
I do not have them. We can ask Mr. Jones to include them.
Okay, thank you.
In response to Wade's question about faulting, I think that's one of the things that would fit underneath factor 9 for sure, and something that we should get some information on. So I would be supportive of hearing more about that under the factor 9 discussion.
Yeah, I was gonna ask if that was a question that we needed to answer. I agree. I would be supportive in seeing that as well under factor number 9.
Okay.
Fault movement, is that what?
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I agree.
Okay. So to reiterate, Wade, next meeting we'll be looking at the environmental and socioeconomic impacts, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Sounds like it'll be interesting. Next item, unless anybody else has anything else to input there. Anybody need the faulting will be moved to either late this year or early next year, maybe included with the private property rights meeting. Otherwise, let's move along to item number 10, GMA 14 Interlocal Agreement Financial Report. Mr. Turco, I believe you provided us a copy of that. I think I got it up into the Dropbox folder.
Yeah, Wade, can you put that up there or do you want me to do it? I'll do it.
I can put it up there.
All right, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Basically, we're moving right along. I do believe that we've gotten some additional payments from the interlocal participants, and things are progressing as we expected. Other than that, not a whole lot to report. There's no expectation at this time that we will exceed the original budgeted amount, and you know, that concludes my report.
Cool. That being said, if nobody has any questions, we will move along. Questions, comments on the financials, anybody? Okay, GMA 14 Interlocal Agreement participant meeting will now be adjourned, and we will reconvene the meeting of the GMA 14 District Representatives. Item 11, discussion and possible action regarding the next meeting date, location, and agenda items. Well, as much as I would like to be meeting in person, as of a couple of weeks ago, I think I've started kicking myself for not getting my the annual Zoom rate, because you know, I don't see us meeting in public anytime this year, unfortunately, the way things are moving along. So that being said, I believe we can all plan on another virtual meeting. If Mike is agreed to host again, that will be extremely appreciated. This format was I liked it quite a bit better than the last one. It was much quieter, a lot less background noise. We can see the participants and everybody's out there a little bit better.
Yeah,
so,
yeah, John, we have no problem hosting that. There was some confusion out there amongst the attendees with the password, and it gets kind of buried inside of the email, and it's kind of hard to find. So we'll just proceed. The next time we do this, there will not be a password required, but you will have to register to try to take that complication out of the equation. And then if it comes to the point where we have to do a password, then we'll make it something, make it more prominent if we can. We're all learning this system as we go. So I appreciate everybody's patience today. And for those of you out there that had a hard time getting on, I certainly apologize for that. And you know, our intention certainly is to make it easier for you, not harder. So we'll work on that next time.
Thank you. Now we just need to choose a day. Is there any specific amount of time you need, Wade? You out there, Wade?
I didn't hear that you'd address that question to me. So the schedule is within 2 months from now. So we're in July. So sometime in September works for us.
August, September, mid-September work for every May or ground. 3rd or 4th week. Anybody have any recommendations? I'm good. Essentially, we just have a holiday on the 7th. And other than that, my schedule is relatively open. So if anybody else has any qualifiers that we cannot have a meeting, what I believe TAG's conference is going to be the first few days of the month, isn't it, Zach?
Yes, sir. It'll be the 1st through the 3rd, and the tagged meeting will actually be September 29th.
Okay.
Act surprised when you see that in your weekly updates.
Yeah, John, other than the 8th, I don't have my schedule's open as well.
Why don't we shoot for 2 months out somewhere. Is Wednesday a preferred day or Thursdays?
Wednesdays.
The 16th,
Wednesday the
how's that
16th.
sound?
Wednesday the 16th would work for Robert and I pretty easily.
Me as well.
Same here. We thumbs up
Works
on
for
everybody?
me.
Gary's good.
Typically scheduled for my board meeting day, so I'd prefer to steer clear of it. But again, knowing that this one is going to be in the morning and my board meeting will be in the evening, I can make it work.
Make it work.
We can do the 15th as well, or the 17th. It looks like. I mean, any 3 of those days work for us.
Same here.
Same here.
Sam, since you had looked this up last month, do you remember what the Washington County Commissioners Court schedule was off the top of your head? Was it Tuesdays?
I don't. I want to say Tuesdays, but
I think so too. Yeah.
I'm looking right now. It looks like every Tuesday at 9 a.m. is when they meet.
So if the 17th works for everybody, Thursday, September 17th, we'll nail that date down. 10 a.m. Good start.
Can we move off of that week and maybe move to the next week so is that I have more?
You're just messing with us now, aren't you, Zach?
Well, I stayed silent and everything else has been going so smoothly. I'm trying to make sure we get that hour and a half mark, I guess.
Make it worth your time for these minutes.
Exactly. Know that there's just a bunch of dead time at the end of this recording is going to be great.
Actually, what you'll find with this one is that it will kill it right there. So you'll be good.
Sweet.
The 23rd or 24th. How's everybody looking for that?
Well, I have a board meeting on the 23rd, and I'm covered up on the 24th.
Okay.
22nd.
Do the morning 3rd.
We can do the morning of the 23rd. Yeah.
Zach, you'll tolerate the 16th if we have a morning meeting? Because that's where I'm leaning right now.
I can get outvoted. It's happened before.
I say let's outvote Zach.
Don't tempt us, Zach.
Vote for Thursday the 16th.
17th.
Oh, Thursday the 17th.
Okay.
Excuse me. We're looking at the Wednesday the 16th.
Wednesday. Okay.
Yes.
So Wednesday the 16th is what we're.
Zach, that you will be able to participate. I know it'll be a little bit of an inconvenience, but I appreciate you making it. I don't want to go through 600 dates clearing it, everybody. If you can make that.
I'll figure it out.
Just send
Do
your
we
backup,
need to-
Zach. We like him better anyway.
Do we need to push it up? Would
Except
that
that
help
doesn't
any?
be much easier, but no, I mean my meeting won't be until 6 p.m. So man, that
Okay.
the time frame for the GMA doesn't interfere.
Cool. Thank you very much, Zach. I appreciate that. So we are nailed down for September 16th, 10 a.m. Sounds good. Not hearing any other comments, questions, anything from anybody. Last chance to speak if you'd like to. I'm moving along to item 12, meeting adjourned. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you all. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank Bye-bye.